Alright, hello. Welcome to today's video. This is a video on how to paint my the 8th Army units. Now, we're assuming you've already built the models, and in my particular case, I've built them all from a Perry miniatures kit. And unlike the Warlord kits, the guns actually are attached to the hands. So these and the heads are part of the body too, so they pretty much come almost assembled. All detail parts. You have to put the arms on the bodies, or arms on the torsos, really. So normally, if it's a Warlord miniature, I don't actually put the gun on right away. Matter of fact, if you take a look, I also have a video out of how I painted my Polish 1st Armored Division infantry, where I go over, again, step by step, how I built and painted those models. This is similar, but of course we're dealing with a completely different paint scheme and slightly different miniatures. The one compromise having to be the fact that the guns are already attached. So the first thing, you need is your paints. Now, I make a big deal all the time about I'm a scale modeler in my background, and so everything for me had to be the right color paints, especially when I was doing model railroading. There you're actually matching paint chips with the paints to make sure you're getting the right stuff. Well, in military miniatures, it's not quite the same. You want to be as close as you can, but you're going to have some variation because your scale, your models are supposed to be out there, beaten up, weathered, in many different types of theaters. So there's a slight difference in the way you do military miniatures from railroading. The reason I bring that up is, I like to paint mine a certain way. Certain colors to use to try to match as much as I can. But what really matters, no matter what colors you use, is you pick the paints that you think look the best. Because remember, these are your models. Don't let anyone try to tell you it should have been this color, should have been that color. Just make it look as good as you can with your own decision on what paints. Now, to help you, you can always go online and find different sources that give you some ideas. One of my favorites to start with is Artisan Designs. They've got a wide variety of, I'll go ahead and put the URL in the description below, of different armies and their color schemes. Matter of fact, let me take a look, show printout I've got here for the 8th Army. It's essentially a nice little cheat sheet for all the different colors you would need, and they give you the item, generally the color, what you want to call it, and then some ideas of what paints you could use. Now, they will give you a range. For example, with the helmet cover itself, or the helmet, you're talking Iraqi sand or dark sand. With the wool uniform, you're talking about U.S. field drab, English uniform, or flat earth. Again, pick the colors that look right to you. Now, the colors I'm choosing today is going to be dark sand, Iraqi sand, sunny skin tone. Let's go ahead and move this over here. Sunny skin tone, all for the layout. Now, what I do normally with my Lee Enfields, especially when I'm in the like North Europe, I use flat brown. But since we're down in the desert, a little more dust around, I'm going to pre-fade it, if you will, by using flat earth. So it'll be a little lighter texture, lighter color than what you'd find in Northern Europe. That could be accounted for in the bleaching of the wood, or just the dust that gets into every little pocket on the wood. I'm still going to be using German gray when it comes to the black, if you will, like the black boots and the actual weapons. Oops, sorry, there you go. From what I'll do is occasionally I'll take a gunmetal highlight I've done a gray highlight if I really feel like it. But this is the base colors. It's really all you need, 5 colors, and you're good to go with the Iraqi, the 8th Army. Okay. All right. So very first thing you need to do, obviously, is base and prime your models. This is a desert, so go ahead and do whatever kind of make sure bases are prepped however you want. You can go ahead and check the video, another video I've got going about how I went ahead and did these sand bases. There's 2 techniques. Because these Perry miniatures actually come on their own small pedestal, I used a filler to kind of sculpt the base so that you didn't have that nice little lip or edge. It's subtle, it's still there, but it's subtle, and it doesn't stand out as well. So when these are fully scenic, they won't be that bad. So start with the overall primer, and the primer coat here is again skeleton bone. I like going with a lighter tan to accentuate and bring out the brighter elements of the browns that the British use. Now, if you're doing desert, it's even more important because you want it to stand a little bit more brighter than some of your figures look, especially if you would use the black base coat like Warlord typically recommends. Alright, now this particular set of methods I'm going to use is nothing spectacular, but it's a quick way to get your models started and going. Matter of fact, get them on the tabletop relatively quickly without a lot of technical skill required. Matter of fact, I think this is probably one of the easiest armies to paint. It allows you to learn color variations as well as get some detail painting going on. It'll help you, I think, get better, practice better. So let's just start. The very first thing we want to do after base priming is get a good base coat on here. Now, normally I start with the skin tones and work my way out, but the skins, there's relatively little skin on here, and I've found out before doing the skin first actually makes it harder to paint the base coat of the uniform. So we're going to start with the uniform and then go back down. So starting with the uniform, we're going to go ahead and use Iraqi sand. Okay, this is a slightly darker sand than the dark sand. That's kind of interesting. Iraqi sand is darker than dark sand. Okay, let me see if you can see this on here. This is Iraqi sand, and this is dark sand. So you can see it is darker. This is coming out a little more yellow on the screen. Or film, but hopefully it comes across well. So let's go ahead and start. And this is really doesn't need to be, you don't have to be super neat. I mean, you don't paint all over the place. Just try to control your brush strokes. But you can use a, 0 or number 1 brush, nice larger brush if you want, and just paint wherever there is clothing. And on the helmet, if the helmet's actually on there already. Now I went ahead and I taped all of my helmets to a box top, and then went ahead and after I primed them, while they were still stuck to that, I went ahead and painted all the helmets with this Iraqi sand as well. And there we go. I just go through a couple here real quick to kind of just give you a visual of how I go about doing this. And then after that we'll go ahead and I'll paint the rest of them, and we'll come back to the next step. Okay, now you'll notice I did not cover the canteen or this pouch really at all. I mean, I got some paint on it, but I didn't paint it, if you know what I mean. Just because it's going to be a different color. No sense in wasting paint. You already have a primer on it. You don't need to base coat that with some other color. Just get underneath the... There we go. All right. Alright, so let's just go ahead. I'll go ahead and pause now. I'll just pick up after I'm done painting Iraqi sand and all the figures. I've got 29 models that I'm working on, just in case I didn't mention that before, or in case it matters. And what I'm going to do though is, I do want to point out something at this point. Some of these models actually have a bayonet extended, okay, as opposed to being in their leather pouch. Well, when you have those kind of additional details, and some others have, see if I can find it real quick. Some of them have goggles or a scarf around their neck. So there's some additional little details that are in there. I haven't decided what colors this will be later. Sorry, the bayonet's going to be natural steels. But when we get to the detail section, I'll go to those other colors that I've decided to use. But for now, we'll stick with those 5 that we're working on. I'm not going to be painting the sand bases right now. I just want to make sure I mention that I only did the uniforms. So I'm leaving the bases as is because I'm eventually going to be painting the boots. And in all likelihood, the boots are going to get something on the sand. So the sand will be cleaned up at the end. Alright, so now that we've done this, the next thing to do is the skin. Because the skin takes up the largest next section of the model, and it's also the lowest portion, lowest layer on the model. So now again, I'm going to use Sunny Skin Tone. This is a slightly warmer, no pun intended, color for skin than the Flat Flesh that I used in Polish first armor division. So there's nothing magic to this. It really is all about just going ahead and painting the arms, the legs, basically the knees, and the faces. Okay, we'll be doing hair, so I'm not going to paint the backs of the head. So, go ahead and put that out there. So just go ahead and start with my commander here, Lieutenant, and we'll just go ahead and start painting them up. See if I can get a focus here. It's kind of coming in a little bit yellowy in the screen, or at least my LCD on the camera. So hopefully it looks really good on the camera. I guess when I go to edit, I'll find out for sure. Okay. So again, just obviously this doesn't take. You all kind of know how to do this part, so we'll just go ahead and I'll pause it here, and when I'm done with all the skin tones, I'll come back and show you, what it looks like at that point and where we go from there. All right? Okay. All right. So we've gotten all the flesh tones on, and we're good to go to the next step. Now, before we do that, I want to mention 2 things. First, if you are interested at this time, you'll notice we used Iraqi sand on the base uniform color. Now, if the sand color you're going to do on your base happens to be the same as the uniform, you can go ahead and paint the base right away, as I've done here. This was kind of a test on my part to see if I like that color or not. But like if you've decided already and you know you're going to be painting it, you might as well do the base coat on the base while you're doing the base coat on the model. Here it happened to be Iraqi sand. I may actually use dark sand. I'm not certain yet. All right. The second thing I want to point out is that if you'll notice on these figures, I did not paint anything over the socks yet. That is because in the next video, I'm going to actually go through a little bit of steps on detail painting. And what I didn't want to do was put an unnecessary layer of paint on the socks. If you want to keep it just bare, tabletop standard, you can just go ahead and use the Iraqi sand on the socks and you're good to go. Or even use the dark sand on the socks when the time comes, just to keep it in the initial 5 colors that you started with. All right, but I'm going to take it one step further on these particular models. All right, so the next step, you need to do it in the right order. We need to work on the weapons and get the metal painted German gray. Unfortunately, the Lee Enfields have a lot of small detail parts that are going to be German gray on a flat earth stock, weapon stock. So you need to do both these, do all your weapons at once. If you're going to do the proper order to do this is the flat earth first on all the Lee Enfield and also the Bren stocks. Those need to be the wood tone. So you'll do all that first, and then you'll go through and you'll do German gray on all of the metal parts. And as I've done here with the Thompson as an example, just kind of showing you, you'll notice that I did not do yet the flat earth on the handle. Initially, I didn't think it really mattered, but then I remembered, wait a second, I've got Lee Enfields, and they are mostly flat earth with black details. So you really need to look at it in that order, because it's easier to paint the small details after you base coat the rifle than it is to try to base coat around the small details. So, next step, flat earth and German gray. All right, let's take a look. We'll go ahead and obviously it's pretty easy to do. I won't actually demonstrate it on camera, but go ahead. I'll come back and we will show you what it looks like once that step is done. All right, so we've just finished painting the weapons. Again, using the brown first, the earth brown, flat earth. We've gone through all the rifles, and I figured at the same time while we're working with the rifles, we'll make sure that the straps, the slings, rifle slings, are also painted. And then once we've done that, we went ahead and went over with the German gray the parts that would be the black metal, which would be the bolt, the sight and barrel tip, one of the bands right where the actual sling is mounted to the rifle, and to actually see beneath here, for example, the magazine and trigger area is also dark, is German gray. So those are all done. Now for the case of these, I went ahead and painted the brown here on these Thompsons, which actually was just as easy to do, even though most of the gun is German gray. The stock, the grip, and the foregrip are entirely brown. Very easy to keep it separate from the black. And the rest of the gun is the German gray. So now all of our guns are done. Now it's all a matter of detail parts. What I call details. Now before I move on to the next step though, I want to show one thing. Some of the models have a bayonet extended. Now one color that is not in the list of paints that I introduced at the beginning of this video was natural steel, which is what I would use, or even gunmetal to use on the bayonets. If you happen to have bayonets, then that's a sixth color you would add, because you really do want that to look a little different than the rest of the weapon. But if you don't, such as most of these rifles and weapons, you don't need to worry about the extra color. The next step is going to be the details on with the bags, the khaki essentially. So he's got himself a pack on his hip. He's got the webbing harness across his shoulders in the back. He's got a belt. He actually has this one is an officer with a pistol holster. And our regular troops have a canteen, bayonet, and then the Bren ammo pouches. So what we're going to do next is paint dark sand over those items that would normally be khaki. So if you look at a regular British uniform, the regular the khaki is lighter than the rest of the uniform. I think that it would look better if the khaki here would have faded in the sun and being a little lighter than the Iraqi sand uniform, I think would look best. That's the route I'm taking here. If you look at like artisan models, I want to stress this again, they use Iraqi sand or dark sand for either the uniform or the webbing. It doesn't matter, they're interchangeable. So I've decided to do Iraqi sand as the uniform, dark sand as the webbing. You can flip it if you want, but it's still the same two colors. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to paint that up. Now I'm going to show real quick. I'm going to use this spotter brush. Okay, this is my very small. Here, I'll put a shadow behind it so you can see. Oh, even better. There you go. It's a nice fine point. This is a 5/0 spotter. Okay, so this allows me to actually paint in those webbing lines very, very accurately. All right, so that's how I'm going to go about doing it next. I can also use it to paint the rest of the details. If I feel like it's taking too long, I'll just go with a slightly larger brush. All right, so let's take a look at what it looks like once you've gotten the webbing painted up with the final color of our mix. All right, so we've done that this much, putting the dark sand, or I should say, dark sand on. Now you'll notice it's not a pronounced difference, but it is different if you can see. It's an extra shade, and that extra shade brings out the detail of the webbing. Okay. All right. So some of the models are very simple because they're only their back is exposed. Others have more of more of the model exposed. And let me show you one quick example here. Here he has his Bren pouches. He also has a canteen. Now I went ahead and painted the whole canteen that dark sand color, even though only the webbing that holds the canteen in place would be khaki. The rest, it'll be painted different, but that's in a different video. We'll go over details. All right, so now we're basically at a point where we can finish the models. Now remember, we're only trying to get this to kind of a tabletop kind of quality. So we have the sand bases. I've decided I'm going to go ahead and use dark sand as a base on most of it. I think that color will look a lot better, even though the Iraqi sand has a nice dark feel to it. It's just, it blends with the uniforms too much. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and let's put the helmets on all of them, because now that we've got the base coat on everything, we're ready to actually glue those helmets on. And from that point forward, it's just a matter of putting a varnish coat on, and you've got the models ready for the tabletop. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like when they're completed. Alright, so we've got them all, helmets on, looking pretty sharp. Now, I'm going to reiterate that you may not want to use the dark sand or in Iraqi sand combination. There is a distinct difference between the two, but from 3 feet away, you're probably not going to notice too much of a difference. So you can actually simplify this slightly by just using one color for all of those. The uniform, the entire uniform. And then when it's done, when your soldiers are completely painted, they look ready to go. I mean, having the brown on the gun with the
black that helps it stand out just a little bit more than having just an all brown gun. So it's ready for the tabletop with 2 exceptions. The next step is to put a light gloss coat on these. 2 things. You want to protect the existing paint, and the second one is you want to really prevent the wash, which I'll talk about in a second, from staining the models too much. See, what you want to do now is you want to kind of reinforce some of the detail and the shadowing, because this kind of looks washed out. If you take a look at there's detail in the shirt and around the webbing. You really can't see too much of it because it all blends together. By putting a little wash on there, you'll end up being able to show some of those details without, going through a lot of effort. Now, because this is such a light color, you don't want to use a strong wash like you would on some of the other miniatures I've done. So we're going to use Army Painter's Soft Tone. So let's kind of show you how that works. What I like to do is I like to get a separate, like a mixing cup or a teaspoon kind of cup to hold my soft tone in, my wash in, so it's easy to pull out. Now this is a little bit lighter than a Agrax Earthshade, so it's a little bit. You may not be able to get the same effect with Agrax. However, I've noticed that a very light application of Agrax might also be able to pull the same effect off. Alright, so now it's just a matter of getting yourself a brush. It's nothing, no fine pointy brush, just a nice area brush. And you're going to paint the wash on. I like going from the bottom up. I'm just going to show that real quick, because what that does is it forces the colors to be, the darkness to be underneath, as opposed to on top. So you just bring it up, and if you see too much pooling, such as right there, just go over it again, pull it up, and the shadows appear below instead of on top. Now, if for any reason you think there's too much on there, you can always grab a second brush and wipe it off, wipe off the excess, so to speak. So, I think it's pretty good. Except up here, maybe a little bit too much. So you just go over it a little bit. Okay. All right. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm gonna go through and do the rest of them, and I'll show you what they all look like. Alright, so that's all the wash is done. We'll take a quick look at what it looks like on a few of the models. Here. Alright, so that's all there really is to it to get your army painted up. 4, maybe 5 colors. Very roughly painted. Nothing. It doesn't take a lot of practice to get to this level. So I encourage you to think about when you actually have an army and you're starting a game. Don't worry about all those little bitty details to make the models look perfect close up. They need to look great at a tabletop level. 3 feet away, 2 feet away. They need to look like they've got all the details, and they deceive the eye a little bit that way. As you have time or desire, you can always go to the next level and do more detail. And so we'll end this video here with this particular, these models completed, ready for the tabletop, if you will, tournament ready. And then the next video that I'll put out on painting the 8th Army models, I'll go through the details and how do you go about painting them, and taking this thing to a next step, this next level. It's not a lot of work. It is another step, though. It does take more time. And to me,
it matters. It actually makes the army look better. But again, it's still not the really, really fine quality that you'll see on some of the, the expert painters with all their details and all the great work they do. This is just trying to keep you guys who are not really enjoying painting or not well practiced at it, getting the best results you can with as little work as possible. Alright, so thanks. Hopefully this video helped. Share, like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.